Okay, so now we're up to page 104. That is, we're talking about Nevuah. Chele Gimel, Pele Gimel. Okay, we're going to learn one little part in Derech Hashem, and then we're going to carry on. Really, what we're doing is a Hagdoma to what is Nevuah. So, if you see on page 104, okay, let's see. Ois Dalet. You have it, Ois Dalet? Va'omnom. So, he was just speaking about Ruach HaKodesh. Now it says Va'omnom. Lemala mizeh yesh malo acheres. There's a madrega higher than the madrega of Ruach HaKodesh. V'hi Nevuah. V'in yono. What's Nevuah? Shiagia ha'odom v'yiskashe b'boire yizborach shemoi v'yizdabek boi dveikus mamash. So last week we spoke about this. The union of Nevuah is the ability to connect, to be dovuk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, dveikus mamash, bo'ifen, sheyargish ha'izdabkus. He should feel the connection. V'yasig mashu mizdabek boi. And he has some sort of hasoga in that which he is dovuk in. Dahainu, what's he dovuk in? Kvoido yizbor shemai. Adherech shenizboa lefonim, the way I'm going to explain to you in the coming paragraphs. V'yeh hadovo boru etzloi, the hasoga, the revelation which he will receive will be boru, umugash mimenu b'li sofek klal. In the same way that you feel something, you know it 100%, so also the hasog of Nevuah is 100%. V'hinei, Ika ha-Nevuah hu. The Ika of Nevuah is hasig hadveikus v'akesher hazeh. Oidoi b'chaim. This is really what we're going to speak about today. There's the English translation of Nevuah. He once said, Moshe Shapiro once said something beautiful. He said that Ben Yehuda, the famous grammaticus, what's it called? The famous what? Yes, he made the dictionary. He said, Ben Yehuda, not only did he ruin the Hebrew language, but he actually, said Moshe Shapiro, ruined our mitzvahs. By a mistranslation of terminology, he actually ruined the mitzvahs. His example was Bikur Chaylim. Yeah? So he says there's a mitzvah of Bikur Chaylim. He said that, one second. Yeah. So he says, the Ben Yehuda translated Levaker, meaning that you visit. Levaker mishu. In Ivrit you say, Ani olech levaker et chaver shli. I'm going to visit my friend. And he took it from, I don't know where he took it from. So he says, first of all, it's a complete mistranslation. He says, Bikur Chaylim is not to visit somebody who's sick. Chazal say, Bikur means you actually give of yourself. Echod b'shishim, you give of yourself to the Chayle. So, Bikur Chaylim is not to visit a sick man, it's to give of, it's, you know what it is? To be totally present. Ad kedei kach, that your presence gives of your presence to the Chayle. So he says, but Ben Yehuda, in his ignorance, didn't understand that. So he took the word of Bikur Chaylim and he mistranslated it, making a visit. He said that not only did he ruin the mitzvah of Bikur Chaylim, but there's another pasuk which absolutely got ruined. David HaMelech says, Achas sha'alti meis Hashem, uiso vakesh, shifti beveis Hashem, kol yemei chayai, levaker be'echoloi. He says, from there, all the Yeshiva Bochum understood that all you need to do is visit the base of Medrash. But visitation is not what you want. You want total presence in the base of Medrash. So the Moshe Shapiro was talking about the word bikur, which was totally mistranslated. But there's another word which is totally mistranslated, and that's called novi. That's novi. What is nevius and what is a novi? In all English translations, you'll find Novi being a prophet. And what is Neviut? His prophecy, meaning that he actually sees future. He actually tells you what's going on, what's going to happen. That's a prophetic, that's what prophecy is. And that's not at all what prophecy is. I mean, you see here from what the Derech Hashem said to us. What is Nevius? Says, look at the wording of the Ramchal. V'nei ika hanavua hu hasig hadveikus va'kesher hazeh. Novi, look at the last paragraph. Inyono shiagia ha'odom v'yiskashe beborach yizborach shemoy v'yizdabek boy dveikus mamish. Bo'oifen sheyagish ha'yizdabkus. That means, what is Nevius? Nevius is total connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what a Novi does. A Novi is somebody who totally connects with Dveikus Gemurah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What comes from there? His Masik Hasoga, which is what? The Hasoga is what he's dovuk in. It's a Hasoga of Beirei Yizbar Shemay. Now, I was looking this week, I had a book I once bought many years ago from Aryeh Kaplan. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan is obsessed with meditation, absolutely obsessed. And he wrote a number of books on it. And one of the books was Meditation and the Bible, which is an outstanding scholarly work. Outstanding. I don't know anyone else who could write such a work. And there, the most phenomenal thing is, so it comes at the end to his meditation, but he explains what is Novi, but he doesn't explain it just theorizing what it is. Besides being a Kabbalist and a physicist, but he was a mumche in diktuk of the Hebrew language. And also a yadin, an unbelievable Talmid Chochem in all the Sforim of all the medakdekim of Lashon Kodesh. So he actually wrote, it's like a thesis on what the word Novi means. And he brings there a number of beautiful diukim from the Lashon of the Torah. But the first thing he brings there is the introduction, and this is really to explain to you why Nevius was so important for all the Sforim. I mean, Nevius is not Shaykh today. Why are they all writing about Novi, where today, when the Beis HaMikdash was Nechrav, there's no more Nevius? So to explain to you first, let's talk about why it was so important and what it is. So he brings there the introduction of Reb Chaim Vital on his Sefer Sha'arei Kedusha. Sha'arei Kedusha was more like his Musa work. It was based on Kabbalistic ideas, but it was written for the layman, and it was really basically a Sefer of Ashkofa, one of the first Sforim of Ashkofa written. And he's got that Hagdoma to a Sefer, so I'm going to bring it up here, and it's important to see. You can all see it now? This is two-page Hagdoma. Oma Hatzoy, Chaim ben Kvoid Rabbi Yosef Vital. Say I, the young man Chaim ben Rabbi Yosef Vital. Ro'isi b'nei aliyah v'hei mu'atim. Mishtoikekim la'alos. I've seen few b'nei aliyah who are desperate, mishtoikekim la'alos, to rise and elevate themselves in Kedusha. V'asulam nisalim menem. That means you have to know the way up. There's a sulam, the same sulam which is Mutzav Alza of Yankiv Avinu. There is a sulam which is literally the pathway to reach from here to any elevated level of Ruchnius. But the sulam is completely gone. ויסבנו בספרי אקדמיים לחפש ולמצוא אורח חיים. את הדרך ילכו בו. Ve'samasun yeshu yatsu lahalis nafshom es shlosh elinu dovko bo Yisrael. Ki hu hashleimus hanisri. And they're searching in all sorts of svarim of the Kadmonim to find this derech to be mit'aleh. And they can't find it. But I'm going to explain to you now, he says, the history behind it. This sulam, this derech lalos, is ki'inyan hanavim. The first time we find it is really by the Nevi'im. Shekol yemeim nidbeku b'koinam. Listen to the language. The Chaim Vital Sefer Shari Kedusha was written 800 years ago. No, yes, 800, 700, 600 years ago. And this was the Hagdoma to all the Sforim of the Ramchal and all those that came afterwards. So it's based on this. So here he says, what was the Voida of the Nevi'im? Shekol Yemem Nidbeku B'koinam. Ube'emtsos advekus ahu. And through this medium of this dveikus, Sholso Aleim Ruach HaKodesh. Lohiroisom, Eze Derech Yishkoin, Oir Lohoir Enem B'Yozei Torah. It did two things. It showed them the way, and it also shed the light. It gave them the light for Rozei Torah. K'mei she'omar David HaMelech. Gal Einai, open my eyes. It's a tefillah HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That means our eyes are limited. They are all basically half closed. In order to open those eyes, Gal Einai, it is a tefillah which David HaMelech davens HaKadosh Baruch Hu, open my eyes that I should be able to see Niflois M'Torah. And these eyes were opened through the oiru HaKadosh Baruch Hu was masher on those who are dovuk boy. That's one of the tachlis of this oir. Ulahadrichom, secondly, lahadrichom b'derech yishara, lo leches al ir Moshev hamezumud leim b'bnei Aliyah, to go to the land which is waiting for those who are the bnei Aliyah. V'achreim, after this battle of the Nevuah, that was the first stage. That was Nevuah. They managed to achieve such a dveikus that they could actually rise up and elevate themselves till they got to Gal Einai V'Abito Niflos M'Torah. Then there was this battle on Nevuah. V'achareim bo Chasidim Orishonim, Hanikroim Prushim. After the Nevi'im came what was called the Prushim. Ubikshu Loses Bikvoseyem Shel Nevi'im. Now, even though there was this battle on Nevuah, and even though the Hasogas on Nevuah was bottled, but they wanted to achieve, go in the same path as the Nevi'im, ulizdam Islam, and to compare themselves to them. That means to elevate themselves into a form of dveikus, to be able to get some sort of oir of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It won't be oir Nevi'us, because oir Nevi'us was bottled, but to get some sort of ruach HaKodesh. And they copied. They literally copied the derech of the Nevi'im. What was the derech of the Nevi'im? Ulizdam Islam b'mo'orois tzurim u'b'midboros. Fascinating. The Avram ben Arambam, in his Sefer Maspik Lo Ivdei Hashem, he's got the last perek in his Sefer is called the perek of Al Hisboidedus. And he writes there, he says, Hisboidedus was the way in which all the Nevi'im and those that came afterwards received Ha'orah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He said, in Hisboidedus is, first of all, Hisboidedus Chitzonit. The only way to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is to disconnect from all the mafrim which are around you. Says Avram ben Rambam, basically, that means the biggest mafria, the biggest thing that disturbs us is the chevra we live in, the rubbish they talk, the things they're busy with. So the first thing that the Nevi'im did was what? They went to the Ma'oros, Tzurim, and Midboros. They went to the caves and they went to the wilderness. That's why says Avram ben Rambam, the Ovis were all royei tzoin. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu was a royei tzoin. It was not because they had some sort of a desire above all else to be with tzoin. It wasn't they loved Tzoyin more than anything else, but they didn't want to be with people. They wanted to be alone. When you're alone, you can connect. When you're alone, you can connect HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So they went to the Midbar, where you see the emptiness in front of you. That's why it says, Yankov Avinu. Lavan says, you want money? I'll give you money. I'll give you this. I'll give you that. I'll give you everything. Says Yankov Avinu to Lavan, no, I want one thing. Let me go back to my sheep. Says the Avram ben the Rambam, it wasn't because he was in love with sheep. It's he wanted to be left alone. His boidedus was the way in which the Nevi'im connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They disconnected from people, from all the trivialities of this world. They disconnected, and they therefore could get the ability to connect HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Says Reb Chaim Vital. So these Prushim, what did they want to do? They wanted to copycat. They wanted to copy the same. They went in the same derech as the Nevi'im. Literally, they became hermits. And some of them, yes, went into the house, were Prushim from the houses. It's fascinating. He says, one of the things I just said, it's unbelievable. He says, there's a few ways to be misboided. He calls it isboidus chitzoni, which brings to isboidus pnimi. One of them is you get away from people, you just go into the midbar. He said, there's another thing also. He said, be constantly walking. That means never stop. Don't ever connect to people. That means you can be what's called, let's call it a wanderer. A wanderer constantly going. So he says, I saw it tonight. It blew my mind. And he says, where's the first time you see it? By Chanoich, he says. V'yishalech Chanoich es ha'elokim. Says Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam, what's the pshat v'yishalech Chanoich es ha'elokim? Unbelievable pshat. V'yishalech Chanoich. Chanoich went. He was constantly going. He was a wanderer. And that's why he was with Elokim. That's why you find that the Tzadikei Yesod Olam, I always thought that the reason why they went into the Golus and they went away from home, you find the Goin went away and a lot of Tzitz Rebbes went. I thought they wanted to go into the Tzar Shechina, just like the Shechina's in Golus. What's it called? The Talmud Dvorah says that a person should go into Golus, should become a wanderer to feel the tzar of the Shechina. But according to the Avraham ben Rambam, there's another reason behind it also. They wanted to be left alone. There was no midbar to go to. If you're stuck in Poland, do you know how far you got to go to get to the Sahara Desert? So instead of going to the Sahara Desert, they did what Chanoich did. They were mishalech. They were going. They went. Leave alone. Leave all the trivialities of this world alone. And that's the way you misboided in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Says, carries on the Reb Chaim Vital. They never stopped to be mahalel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. 1 second. Move it down 1 minute. Yeah. Beisak HaTorah b'shirei David HaMelech. Hamasamchim es haleiv. Again, Simchas haleiv brings the dveikus. Ad asher tidbak machshavtom bekoyach v'cheshik nimrots bo'iris halyoinim. The Prushim, even though they couldn't get to Nevius, but they were dovuk through all these different eitzes, they were dovuk in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'smidu bekach kol hayoim ad asher olu l'madregas ruach HaKodesh v'yisnabu v'lo yosofu k'mo shetirgem unklos v'lo yipsaku. And we're not talking about Nevius here, because it's talking about after there's this battle Nevius. But Ruach HaKodesh is also a form of Nevius. Carries on Reb Chaim Vital. Even though the Nevi'im and the Prushim were different, even though they were different and they couldn't get the same madrigas, they went in the same way. So will we. He said they were so rare, these people, and they were living alone, and they didn't mix with people, that the knowledge and the derech in which they were masig this vekus is lost from us. Now we're in the stage that there's no more prushim, and there's no more neviim, and there's no more ruach hakodesh. So heimol nuchaseyem. They went, they were nifta, and they left us alone. Tzmeim gam re'evim, ada shetzomach yeyush belibois b'nei odom losu b'chochma nifloa lezu. Until there's a yush, none of us know how to be masig this dveikus, this chochma, to be masig dveikus. If you find 2-3 grains in a massive house full of corn, echod meir, shnayim mishpocha mavakshim mayim v'oyin, ki nistam chol chozoin, lesibas asher loikosu b'sefer oifem maseu, liskore v'logesh l'hakedesh p'nima. It's not written, and we don't know how to do it. It's been lost. It's a hidden, it's something that should be lost completely. Then he carries on. One second, I'm just going to go to end. He says all these things, he says, have been lost, and my job, he writes at the end, is hine lochen hetzikasni ruach bitni lahati lafrushi velitmich b'minam lohiris lem derech yechobo. Because of the lack of knowledge to achieve dveikus in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, al kein chibati chibur ze ktana kambutz v'rav ha'eichus lemaskilim yazhiru ukrosiv sha'arei kedusha ubo avoy sesorim v'chulei b'shavas mekabel from the Arizal, in order to somehow get back what? The Ruach HaKodesh. Get back. That means Nevius, which is Dveikus, the side of Dveikus, the Neviim had, the Prushim had, and the Sefer Sharei Kedusha was written as a handbook, how to be masig some form of Dveikus of Ruach HaKodesh. And that was the whole of Mesilas Yesharim. So again, we see one thing. Nevius, Ruach HaKodesh, Hasogas, Rosei Torah, it's all one thing. It's called Dveikus in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's just different levels of Dveikus in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, the phenomenal thing is, all this lies in the word Novi. What's the shirish of the word Novi? So Rabbi Kaplan brings like this. He brings a few Makairos. One of them is Reb Shamshon Fall Hirsch. This is on the Pasuk, a very interesting Pasuk. The Pasuk says, this was the first time the word Novi is brought in the Torah. This was by Avram, and Avimelech. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns around to Avimelech, and he says to Avimelech like this. He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns like this, V'ato, Hoshev Eishes Ho'ish, give back this woman, sorrow, to this man, ki novihu, for he is a novi. V'yispalel ba'adcho. We've seen a novi who prophesizes. We've seen a novi who tells asidus. But what's novi got to do with v'yispalel ba'adcho? Says the Pshamshon Fall Hirsch. Novi. Misherish nun base aleph. Now, a lot of times we know aleph and ayin interchange. Says the Pshamshon Fall Hirsch, koruiv lenoivea with an ayin. Mayan Mayim. Mayan Mayim. It's the source of the water, that the water comes out of it. A source where there's when there's a nevea, means there's literally something which pours out from a source. Mayon Mayim Chaim. He becomes a Mayan, an outpouring of Mayim Chaim, Lidva Hashem V'Ruach Kodshoy. Listen to the words. Tzinoir. He becomes a tzinoir, becomes literally a pipe. Shedarkoi oiver hashefa ho'eloki elo odom. Meshum kach gam mishkal Hashem nigzam binyan poel. That means, again, what's the word novi, says the Pshan Shafar Lersh? It's got nothing to do with prophesizing. Novi comes from the lotion of noveya. When something pours out, you have a source, and through this source literally, when you have a mayon, what is a mayon? A mayon's a channel through which the waters which lie under the earth can rise through this channel and come out. It's an outpouring of the water from the inside of the earth coming out. Says Psham Shafar Lersh, that's the Shem of Novi. The Novi becomes a channel through which there's an outpour. There's literally a nevi'ah of ruach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu coming from the inside. Which again, that's perfectly what we were saying. Because a Novi, through his connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he becomes a Mayon HaNoveya to the ruach, to the hasoga of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's come, literally, the Novi and the Nevi'ut, the wording, the language refers not to what's coming, not to how it comes out to us. It will come out to us as a prophecy. But what is that prophecy? It's the ruach. It's the ruach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is noveya through him. Even more beautiful, he brings there, and I think this is his own vote. He brings another pasuk. He brings a pasuk in Eof. The pasuk in Eof says, "Ve'ish novuv yilovev." Says, what do you mean ish novuv? Ish novuv, says Rashi, ish cholul beloy leiv yilovev. Novuv, nun beis, is the sheresh for meaning something which is hollow. So he says, I think he brings it from the Alshich, if I'm not mistaken. He says the lotion of Novi is a hollowed out person. That's no contradiction whatsoever to what the Pshan Shafar Lersh says. It's two ways of getting to the same understanding. He's no more than a channel. He channels the Shefa of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The oil of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is channeled through him. Novuv is a lotion of hollows. He literally hollows himself in order to be able to become a channel for that Ruach HaKodesh which comes out. He says there's a lotion which comes in Novi many, many times, that the Novi was mit nabe, hit nabe. Hit nabe is lotion hifil. Hifil means he novid himself. Hit nabe, he novid himself. He says, how do you translate the word he novid himself? But if nevi'ut is not a prophecy, but it's the transformation, taking himself and making himself into being a kli, which is ro for this nevi'ut. So what's his job? He hollowed himself out. Or he made himself into being a channel. How do you do that? That's the avodah of dveikus. That's why they were misboided. That's why they literally, you know, there's a beautiful a beautiful story that's brought in the end of Shari Kedusha of Reb Chaim Vital. He brings there was Reb Yitzchak Isaac Mi'ako. He was called Reb Isaac Saginoe. He was blind. He was the Rebbe of the Rav Avad. The Beis HaMedrash of the Ramban was, first of all, was Reb Isaac Saginoe. Then there was the Rav Avad, and then there was the Ramban. It was all one Beis HaMedrash. So somebody came and the Yitzchak Saginoe was they were all enormous Mekubalim. And somebody came to him and said to him that he wants to join into the chevra of the Mekubalim. Then it wasn't just wearing white and charging money. In those days, to become a Mekubal meant that you have to become somebody who was row for Ruach HaKodesh. So he said, so Yitzchak Saginoe asked him like this, tell me, if somebody comes to you and tells you that you said a good sheh, and then somebody comes after you and says, you gave a bad sheh, do you feel different? Somebody comes up to you and calls you a tzaddik, and then somebody else comes up to you afterwards and calls you a behemoth. Do you feel different? So he said, yes. He says, so you've not yet come to the madrega that you can come into learning my Beis HaMedrash. Why? Because there's a midah of hishtavus. The midah of hishtavus is, and without the midah of hishtavus, you cannot receive in any way shefa milamalo. Hishtavus is, I think there's a word, and maybe you can help me. Stoicism, is it called Stoicism? Was it Stoicism? Something. It was also by there was a group of philosophers. What does it mean? It means to get the madrega, to get to the level. There's no more I. I'm irrelevant. There's no more I. If there's no more I, then it makes a difference if I'm a tzaddik or I'm a behemoth, because what you think of me is irrelevant. The Rambam in Ovis, in Perek Vov, talks about this midah v'shtavus, and he brings that from one of the Hasidim Horishonim. The Rambam in Pirush Mishnayos. He said it's said over from one of the Hasidim Horishonim that he went on a trip and he didn't have enough money, and he looked like a religious. It's a bit like today, that the Haredim are, they're the ones who they're the plague mongers, yeah. So in those days, a guy with a beard, and he said then they thought it was a schnorrer. And they put him not at the top, not in the middle, but at the bottom. That means he wasn't even with the lowly travelers. He was at the bottom with all the junk. And he said at the end of the trip, he says, a sailor came past me, a sailor came there, and he urinated on me. And he said, and then I was the happiest moment of my whole life. He says, why? Because I realized I'd achieved the madrega of hishtavus. You want to urinate on me? You don't, it's irrelevant. I am what I am. I am not what people look at me as. It's not, they call it in the modern terminology, it's inside out, not outside in. But this is the extreme of inside out. There's no out. It doesn't have to be, I'm inside. I don't care nothing. The midah of Ishtavus was the midah which was needed for a soga of what? Any form of shefa v'kadosh baruch hu. Nevius, the Nevi'im, the Prushim, all the Mekubalim, made no difference. Because all three were based on one thing, the ability to completely ignore myself. I do not exist. That's what's called, that's the lotion of nun base. Nun base, meaning like the apostle says in Eov, to hollow oneself out. I've taken out all that's inside me. I am no more than a vessel to accept the Shefa v'Kadosh Baruch Hu. That was a Novi. That's a Novi. That's what a Novi is. The outcome is the prophetic story. That's not the Novi. The Novi was a person who was mitnabeh. He was the person who hollowed himself out, achieved the mid of ishtavus, who was misguided in the midbar to get to the situation that I am what I am. No connection to anything else. That's what I am. The posuk, now look at the posuk. It's unbelievable. It's a posuk in Shmuel. The posuk in Shmuel, beautiful. Here you see even the greatest. Here he brings the extreme case where literally a Novi, look at this lashon. They had Shaul HaMelech. Now Shaul was not a Novi, but Shmuel wanted him to achieve or to receive some sort of Nevi'ut. So Shmuel tells him, listen, go to Beisel, yes? Go to Beisel, and you'll meet people. V'shaul l'chol l'sholem. V'znochzu l'chol shtei lechem. V'lakachto miyodam. Achar kein tov v'yigivas ha'elokim. Yeah? V'yi kivoyech Hashem ha'ir, when you get there, u'pogato chevel neviim. You will meet there, says Shmuel, to Shaul, you'll meet there a group of Nevi'im, Yerdim mihabomo, v'lifneim nevel v'soif v'chol v'chinoy. They've got musical instruments because that was the way they, as Rabbi Ari Kaplan says, they meditated. It was a way to meditate, a way to literally leave themselves. Now look at this lashon. Veheimo misnabim. Again, they are misnabim. That doesn't mean they're giving prophecy. They are mitnabim. V'tzolcho alecho, they will imbue you. Ruach Hashem. Listen to this. They will imbue you with Ruach Hashem. 1 second, moving to the side. Can you imagine such a thing? This is literally being able to transfer Nevius. Look at it. V'tzolcho lecho ruach Hashem. V'hisnabeso. Sorry. V'hisnabeso imom. V'nefachto leish acher. This is literally the Nevi'im with an ability to what? To receive Nevuah, to be mitnabeh, and to channel it onto Shaul, that Shaul will be able to get a prophetic vision. With the literal translation, as we understood from Art Scroll, that Nevi'us is prophecy, what on earth are they doing? But that's not what they are. They were hollowing themselves out. They were being mitnabeh. They became a medium. They became a mayon. They became an outpour of what? Of Shefa v'Kadosh Baruch Hu. And they had an ability to channel that onto Shaul. And literally, through them, Shaul was misnabeh. It says Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, Zichar Tzadik v'Kodesh Livrocho, you have no bigger proof that Nevi'us is not prophecy than there. An ability to give over the koyach of Nevuah to somebody else. Why? Literally, I'm sorry to use the description, it's like a ray gun. Literally, they become a channel to be able to project some sort of shefa eloki onto somebody who's ro'ulachein, onto Shaul, in order that he could be able to give Nevi'us. Because Nevi'us is dveikus and becoming a channel to the Ruach. The last and the most beautiful place that he brings is in Yecheskel. Here he says like this. It's stunning. It's a mamash. This is talking about the famous Nevius of Yechezkel, when he's talking about the Atzomis Yeveshos. Now here talking about Yechezkel, who's literally becoming some sort of conduit for the ability to be Mechayeh Mesim. Vayoyme Elai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to me, Hinobe El Horuach. I don't even know how to translate it. Hinobe El Haruach. Hinobe Ben Odom. V'omart al Ruach Kol Yom Hashem Elokim. Me'aba Ruchois Boi Haruach U'Pechiva. Vehinabesi. Listen to this language. Hifil. It's not even Hifil. Vehina, yes. Vehinabesi. And I nevued myself. I nevued myself. Kasha tzivoni, in the same way that I was commanded. Vatovoi bohem haruach. And through that, the ruach came onto that Tzomes Yeveshos, v'yichyu v'yamdu aragleim, chai godel moed. V'yoyme elai ben odom atzomes eile. 1 second. 1 second, let me just the next. Don't know why it's not working. Here we are. V'yoyme elai ben odom atzomes eile kol beit Yisrael heimo. Hidei oimrim yovshu atzmeseinu v'ovdo tikvoseinu. Nigzanu lonu lochein hinobe v'omato aleim koyom Hashem Elokim hine ani posech es kivreseim v'aleis eschem. So here, the hinobe is with some sort of amira. Hinobe v'omato aleim. But the first times was nothing got to do with the views. The first time it was v'yoyme elai hinobe el haruach. What's hinobe el haruach? V'inabesi kasher tzivonu v'yichyu atzomos. Says Rabbi Kaplan. Here you have another classic example. In the same way that Shmuel tells Shaul, let those Nevi'im become the channel for the Ruach HaNevius to be shayra on you. Here HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Yechezkel, Hinovei, to the Ruach, and through that become a channel for Tchias HaMesim of the Atzomos. So the word Nevuah has got nothing, it's nothing to do with the prophecy. It's just that the most commonly time, he says something else. I mean, he says, I'll give you another example. It's a beautiful example. He gives there another one. He says, until Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, until the Nevius was bottled, there was no form of tefillah. Every time you wanted davening, you wanted some sort of something from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so you went to a Talmud of the Novi, or there were Talmidim of the Nevi'im, and they literally prayed for you, because they knew the forms of tefillah in order to be able to get the shefa milamala. So he says, and then there was Botlo Nevius, Anshe Knesset HaGedolah were Masada davening. And they gave a kvius in the davening with the words. Where hidden in the words is all sorts of things. He says, I think he brings it from Rav Haigoin, the Loshen Chazan. So we know that Chazan is the person who davens for an omet. But it comes from the Loshen of Chazoin. Chazoin is, what's Chazoin? Chazoin is the prophecy of the Nevuah. Chazoin is the re'iyah not only of the re'iyah of the shefa. The Chazoin was the Novi who was the Chazoin. So he says, why using the same language? Because before Anshe Knesset HaGedolah were mesakin davening, anytime you wanted a tefillah, you went to a professional Chazon. You went to the Novi or the Talmud of the Novi. He davened for you. That was the job of the Novi. The same way that Avram Avinu, Avimelech, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Avimelech, go to Avram, he was a Novi, he'll daven for you. He knows how to daven. The Chazan is the Chazoin. The Chazan today is in the place of the Talmud, of the Talmidei of the Nevi'im. They used to be the Chazoim. They used to help and the davening of each individual lefi their own Chazoim. That is Nevi'us. And that's why it's so important to all the Sforim. Nevi'us, because even though we don't have Nevi'us, but we have the derech of the Nevi'im. The derech of the Nevi'im exists today, even though we can't achieve the dveikus. And we can't achieve what they achieved, and we can't achieve what the Prushim achieved. We can't achieve what the Mekubalim or Rishonim achieved. But the derech still exists. That's why it's so important for us to learn what a Novi was. Because on him we base our avodah. That's the avodah of the Chosid and the Kodesh at the end of the Mesilas Yesharim. And that's our avodah here. And every person to his own level, that has some form of dveikus, some form of it, that still remains, as Reb Chaim Vital said, the sulam, which is mutzav also, that derech lalois, that derech of the Novi exists today. We might not get up that high, but the pathway is still there. That's why Nevi'us was so important to all the Sforim. And all the Sforim, even though we're talking about centuries after Nevi'us has gone, but to put down the Yesodus of Nevi'us is important for us today. And all because Nevi'us is Dveikus and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not the prophecy. It's not the end result. It's the path. It's the hollowing out. It's the avodah to hollow ourselves out, to become a mayon hamizgaber, to become a channel. And that possibility still exists today. Chaim Vital wrote the Sefer Sha'arei Kedusha. And generation afterwards, the Ramchal wrote Mesilas Yesharim. But in Mesilas Yesharim, he doesn't explain what he's doing. In Derech Hashem, he explains to us what is Nevi'us. The way to receive it, the way to achieve it, the Derech Yelchu Bo, that's Mesilas Yesharim. The Mesila of the Yesharim, that is the way. So Mitzvah Hashem, I mean, I know we only learned 5 lines, but I think the introduction for Nevi'us, the terminology of Nevi'us is so important. And once you've seen it, then you understand when the Ramchal writes, Ike hanavua hu, hasig hadveikus vakesha hazeh, he says 4 words, and he means within it lies a world. And that kesha is still possible. In our own way, but it's still possible. Shkoyach Rabbi Yisai, we will carry on in Mitzvah Hashem next week. Seid mir gesund, I hope you enjoyed it. Kol tov. Shkoyach, kol tov. Umein, kol tov.